Is self-defense and hearing healthcare really that offensive? So we've been talking a lot about the Short Act and the Hearing Protection Act. I wanted to go into a little bit of depth on the background, what we're actually trying to accomplish here. So for decades, long guns, shotguns and rifles with short barrels have been heavily regulated, and so have sound suppressors. You know, a suppressor for your gun, extremely heavily regulated, both those things, short-barreled rifles and shotguns and suppressors. Well, why? Why is that? Well, the NFA and the Miller decision from the Supreme Court were to blame, along with a lot of emotion. So let's talk a little bit more about it. I'm going to get into a little bit of depth on the NFA, and we're going to talk about the Miller decision from the Supreme Court back in the 30s. So the Stop Harassing Owners of Rifles Act, which is what SHORT stands for, right? SHORT. Stop Harassing Owners of Rifles Today. That's Act HR 2395. That's a House bill that will delete the taxation, registration, regulation in the NFA, National Firearms Act, of firearms currently classified as short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and any other weapons. So the Hearing Protection Act, that's HR 404. So they're two separate bills, even though they're both kind of taking the same path through Congress. That's a legislative proposal aimed at amending the IRS, the actual or the Internal Revenue Code through the IRS. And that's going to remove silencers from the definition of firearms, thereby basically easing the regulations that surround them and their purchase and their ownership on a federal level. And we'll talk a little bit. You know, gee, I live here in California. What's this going to do for me? And we'll talk a little bit about it. But first, let's talk about the NFA. A lot of talk about the NFA. I think every gun owner has heard the term NFA, but I'm not sure how many people really know much about the NFA. So I wanted to just talk about a few different facts. So the NFA, that's the National Firearms Act. That's what NFA stands for. It was passed in 1934, almost 100 years ago. There's also the Gun Control Act in 1968. They kind of work hand in hand with, you know, the NFA and the Gun Control Act in 1968. But really, we're going to concentrate on the NFA right now because that's really what's been happening. Now, what happened in 1934? Why did they do this? Well, in 1934 there was prohibition, which means they outlawed alcohol. So what happens? Well, it immediately created a black market. Immediately, organized crime started filling the want for alcohol, and it created this huge war zone across America. You know, there's a lot of crime, and they were using firearms to commit a lot of this crime. The biggest example was the Valentine's Day Massacre. That was a big catalyst for the NFA. The Valentine's Day Massacre, interestingly enough, if you go to the Mob Museum in downtown Las Vegas, they've actually taken a portion of the wall where the Valentine's Day Massacre happened, and they put it in this museum. You can see the 45 caliber holes. Well, that was a big deal. The Valentine's Day Massacre was a big deal. It was criminals killing criminals, but it was extremely violent, especially for the date back in 1934. So that was the big catalyst. So what they did is they said, hey, in order to obtain these, you have to get a $200 tax stamp. Now that $200 doesn't seem like a lot of money today. Like, hey, $200 isn't a big deal. But in 1934, that $200 was meant to be a prohibition. In 1934, $200 American dollars would be the equivalent of like $4,700 today. Imagine if it wasn't a $200 obstacle, it was a $4,700 obstacle. But what I want you to take away from that is this was meant to be a prohibition. This was meant to stop people from getting rifles and shotguns with short barrels. This was meant to stop people from getting suppressors, because who could afford $4,700 in 1934? Or $200, in 1934. It's like trying to afford $4,700 today. Clearly meant to be a prohibition. So originally, pistols and revolvers were to be regulated as strictly as machine guns. Towards that end, cutting down a rifle or shotgun to circumvent the handgun restrictions by making a concealable weapon was taxed as strictly as a machine gun. So they were trying to stop people from getting around this tax situation. So how did the NFA define firearms for its purpose? Well, the term firearm for the NFA purposes means a shotgun or a rifle having a barrel less than 18 inches in length, or any other weapon except a pistol or revolver from which a shot is discharged by an explosive if such weapon is capable of being concealed on the person or a machine gun and includes a muffler or silencer for any firearm, whether or not such firearm is included within the foregoing definition. That is a direct quote from the NFA. That's how it's designed. So what types of firearms does the NFA actually cover? Well, it's just a couple of different categories. Number one, machine guns, which they mean full auto. Number two, short-barreled rifles, which is everything under 18 inches. Now, don't be confused by state law. California has different laws when it comes to barrels and rifles, and we're not going to get confused here in this segment. I just want you to know what the actual federal government has on the books. So machine guns, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and then deadly devices, which the examples they gave are grenades, bombs, explosive missiles, poisonous gas, that type of stuff, and suppressors. And then there's this category called any other weapon, which is something that they can't really define easily, but fits within the category. But really, what we're just talking about today are the short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and suppressors. So it's not even the entire NFA. It's just those pieces. So why do they call it a tax stamp? Kind of interesting. The reason they call it a tax stamp is you go through this process and then you actually get a tax stamp, which I think we have a picture of. So it actually looks like a stamp. It looks like something you'd put on an envelope. This is an example of what $200 gets you. So how do you get that stamp? Okay, so again, this is not meant to be comprehensive. I'm not going to go through every single detail, but basically you have to go to a specialized dealer, so somebody who's licensed to sell these types of items. Not necessarily every single FFL can sell a short-barreled rifle or shotgun or a suppressor. They have to have a specialized license. And then you fill out an application, you pay the $200 tax, and then you sit for months while the ATF may or may not approve you. And then it also can't conflict with state law. So right now, California, for example, even if you were able to go through the process, which you wouldn't be able to successfully go through, because California has a set of laws that basically says no suppressors. I mean, in essence, it's almost completely impossible to get a suppressor. So it also has to comply with state law. So we're going to talk about, well, why do we care? We live in California. Why do we even care about federal law if it's not going to help us? Well, let me get to that. And what is the Supreme Court case of 1938, the Miller case? What does that have to do with any of this? Well, it's kind of interesting. That Supreme Court case. Hey, thanks for watching Gun Owners Radio. I hope you loved that clip. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and follow us on social media, and check out our website at gunownersradio.com.